am Sam McCart, and I'm here to talk about Comcast's transformation journey. We were joking, the buzzword of this morning seems to be transformation, so we're going to see how many times I can squeeze it in today. So let's first talk a little bit about life and who I am, and then we'll talk about the journey that we're on and how we're delivering. So on a personal side, my husband Andrew and I have been together for 14 years. We live in Nashville, go Vols. We have 3 kids, which have proven to be very similar to a supply chain transformation, exhausting and rewarding, but mostly tired. So as we move to the work side, I went to the University of Tennessee. I spent my formative supply chain early years in consumer products, primarily hearing a lot from Walmart, Amazon, and Target about how we could do better, and striving day and night to do just that. After about 10 years of that, I moved to Bridgestone, where I learned the industrial automotive side of life, and actually worked on, Bridgestone was a very early '09 customer, so my team ran their demand planning leveraging '09. Then I left and went to Comcast, where I now am I lead planning for Comcast, which leads you to potentially say Comcast has a supply chain. Is normally the question I get. So let's talk about our supply chain. So my team is really focused on the product side of life for us, which is Comcast's bread and butter, right, is internet and video services. So we deploy tens of millions of boxes every year to our customers of wireless gateways and video boxes. And the forward and reverse logistics process of that is a huge component and a huge cost driver of what we do. We also, if you have been to a Comcast service center, I want you to, after you leave today, go to an Xfinity mobile store, because you'll find a very different retail experience versus a desk in the back that takes an old box from you. So we have a very Apple-esque like retail experience in about 600 stores across the country, and a very rapidly growing mobile business. So some of our biggest suppliers are Apple, Samsung, Google, Moto, and all the accessories that go with that. So my team focuses heavily there. Last but not least, the area of focus that we have is all of the what we call outside plant, or construction materials that it takes to maintain, upgrade, and expand the network that provides all of our customers with internet and video services across the country. So we spend billions of dollars on materials in that every year across tens of thousands of SKUs, and my team does the forecasting, supply planning, vendor management, and replenishment of those to the hundreds of sites across the country that we support on project-based work. So let's talk about our supply chain transformation. That's 3 in case you're counting. So for us, it starts, and I think Jason said it best, it starts with the pie. So our transformation started with a strategy that we got aligned with our executive leadership team all the way up, and everyone on the same page. We want supply chain to be a core competency for us. How are we going to do that? 5 things. The first of which is network optimization, right? We've got a growing mobile business. We have, I don't know if you've noticed, but boxes are getting smaller and you need less of them. So we have a shrinking box network in our footprint, and how do we manage that? The second is to aggressively scale costs as our volume changes. The next is to drive process improvement with continuous process improvement. Transportation management, as my boss regularly tells me, trucks cost money, expedited trucks cost lots of money. So how do we avoid that and optimize? And then all 4 of those things are powered by modernizing our planning. And you'll notice the icon next to that is a rocket ship, because we have a lot of opportunity and ways to go. And we are trying to get there very, very fast. So once that strategy was approved, we then moved to a structure. So the structure, quite simply, is for the first time in Comcast history, we have a planning team. So I joke we're a team that grew by acquisition. So we had 14 different regions and 3 different divisions that all had supply chain people across the country, some of which would not have identified as a supply chain person before they started reporting to the head of supply chain. So we combined those people and started to build a structure and a culture driving our strategy, really driven by you're all planning. We do the same thing in different ways, and we want to do it better together. And the last piece of that is we established a planning COE. And at the beginning of the process, it's really tied to pick a tool, design a tool, implement the tool. And long term, there's process, people, and development that happens in that space. We jokingly call that role the mechanic, because you have to understand how the car works, you have to be able to fix it, and you have to be able to explain to your customers why it costs so much money, so they'll keep funding it. So we established a structure. Last, but certainly not least, and really where the heavy lifting came into play, is around our process and enablers. So I like to joke we were one pivot table refresh away from disappointing a lot of people. So we started on a journey, we were almost 100% Excel-based, which I think a lot of people in this room can relate to. Even if you had a system, you were Excel-based. And really where we've launched is two things. The first of which is like general planning best practices. So S&OP, I can't quite call this IBP yet. I really wanted to put that on the page. We're not quite all the way there yet, but when I started, we had one business running an S&OP process, which was one meeting every month. We now, across all three cores of our business, in mobile, materials, and CPE, are running S&OP processes, where finance is heavily engaged along with our operations and commercial partners on what we're doing and how we're doing it. The next of which is an S&OE process. So if we don't leave room for all the tactical executional conversation, we can't talk about anything past the next basically 2 weeks. So that is the place that we have those conversations and where we're driving the tactical, like the blocking and tackling that has to exist for us to be able to think longer term than the next 6 weeks. The final piece is really around CPFR and how we collaborate with our vendors. We were not, for the majority of our top vendors, we were not sharing forecasts. We were sending them a PO at a lead time that we felt was appropriate, and judging by all of the supply chain enthusiasts in the room, you know that doesn't always land well. So the sharing of the forecast, that tough conversations sometimes, but the conversations that we needed to have, were all part of the process and drivers that we've been implementing. Last but not least, I promise I'll get to 09, was really around the tool to support it. So we went through a full RFP. We selected 09 because we knew what we needed was flexibility. That's what drove us to 09, and it's what we've been able to leverage to get the momentum we needed to keep going. So let's talk about our implementation. So we started by establishing a planning COE at the same time that we went into an RFP. If you're thinking about going with a planning COE, the person that we selected to hire into that was a high potential employee who was great on the business side, great with people, understood the process, but is really known as a collaborator. We selected Orhan and put him into that role where he really set up the COE and started documenting what were the practices, what were the best practices, what do we need to stop and start doing, and establish our user stories. For the next 2 years, they basically have run the implementations that we've been doing, as well as help drive process and culture across the team, and most importantly, develop our team and ready our people for the change that we're driving. One of my favorite things about Comcast's transformation journey is the fact that we have been running 2 simultaneous but separate 09 implementations. So 2 very different businesses, between a mobile business where your biggest supplier is Apple, who has a high level of expectation about how complex your supply chain is and how capable you are, versus construction materials that prior to centralizing and the nationalization that we did was primarily run by engineers saying, hey, I need this tomorrow to start this project, let's go. So 2 very different needs and use cases and very different levels of user readiness and business readiness for a tool. So we've approached our Xfinity Mobile implementation in like the classic implementation process. So the goal was demand, supply, and ultimately replenishment and capability. What we saw was that that project, about mid-cycle, so the middle of last year, found itself in a major ditch, very candidly. That project had really high expectations from the user, and the users basically were hell-bent, for lack of a better word, that we were going to deliver exactly what they asked, even if it wasn't best in class and it wasn't how the tool should or could work. So we use that as an opportunity. We launched demand planning. We're actually launching some machine learning capability now, which is really exciting in that space. But we use that as an opportunity to take a step back, a breather from the project, re-RFP for an SI. We actually selected a different SI and have now moved forward with the second phase of our implementation for supply and replenishment. The construction materials side is the exact opposite story of that. So we knew that we had a business need identified in the middle of 2023. The intent was for these projects to run one after another. We identified a business need. We had gotten enough momentum in the implementation of demand planning and where we were in that process and the accuracy we could get for our customers quickly, that we were able to fund the construction material work and pull that implementation forward by years. What's been really exciting about that is we did the opposite of what anyone would tell you should do. We launched with purchasing first. So that business, basically 3 months prior, had started forecasting for the first time. And what we did was take an Excel upload of a forecast and figure out across our multi-echelon distribution network how we should buy and where we should buy. What we've seen is literally hundreds of millions of dollars in purchasing savings that happened nearly immediately on implementation, driven by the process changes that we made that were supported by a tool versus having to work in Excel. We're now going backwards and implementing demand planning and replenishment if Orhan's listening, in about 3 weeks. So really excited to see the teams work on that as we move forward in our next step. Okay, so nothing builds momentum like momentum. That is what we've learned, and that's what we're driving. So our results, we've reduced spend, and we've dramatically reduced our inventory in the very early phases of this process. We have a big focus for us this year was we need to bring reliability back to our supply chain. So we were so focused on getting inventory and spend out of the network that we got unreliable for a period of time. We didn't have a ton of credibility coming out of COVID, so what we did have, we shed as we were shedding inventory across our network. So the focus has been how do we improve our customer service, both to internal and external customers, so people know when they order something that they're gonna get it and we don't have hoarding throughout our network. We have seen that happen in the last basically 12 months on this journey, and we're really excited about where we're going. Most importantly, our team, our internal team, so we are a big believer in employee NPS, engagement and scores. And what we've seen over time is our internal engagement is increasing rapidly as a result of the team seeing, 1, that we're investing in them, 2, that we're listening to their input, and 3, we've selected a tool that allows them to customize where they want without having to absolutely pitch a fit about standard configs, which is my personal favorite thing about 09. In the best practice space, what we have found from implementations as best practices, first and foremost, is a phased release functionality. I've been a part of Big Bang launches before. We have felt with 09 that the phased release schedule was much more lucrative for us to help us build momentum and help the business user who we needed to inform the development to understand step by step what they were getting. The second of which was internal 09 sustainment and development capabilities. So a big part of our COE is we want the internal in-house capability to do dev and releases. Part of our strategy in our COE is a team of people that are IBPL capable and doing internal releases and giving us enhancements. So they're having conversations. They actually sit next to the users of the tool outside my office, and I watch every day people yell back and forth, like, why doesn't it do this? Well, I can make it do it. What's the user case? Like, it's this amazing thing that happens on the floor every day at our office. Last but not least, implementation flexibility. So what we learned was that we needed to go solve the problem and not do it exactly the way we were supposed to. And what we saw in the purchasing implementation in materials is exactly that. And it's built the momentum for us to have our CFO asking in meetings, how is 09 going and what do you need to go faster? So that is Comcast supply chain transformation. Thank you.